Well, I said that I would add some more stuff when I had gone through it, and cool, I'm having a crash course back in history to understand what was happening about. Well, I started off with the middle 1880s, uh, because obviously when the black president died and so forth like that. But it took me, a few people said, no, I think it happened in 1810, 1812. But there was a lot going on then. So we'll go back because you have to always go back. So, wow, talk about a crash course in history. My goodness gracious me, I never thought that I'd spent so long. Well, it probably isn't very long, but I was at the end of the video and I felt that I needed to put a bit back in the beginning of the video. I mean, do you see windmills on there? I'm a bit shocked. I never realised. I've heard people talking about it, so I thought, let's look up windmills. What do people think that windmills are made, what they did, what they were made for? Have a guess. Anybody got any ideas? Not only was it for grinding, it extracted the water. It was a water pump. So these things were made a long time ago in the 1600s. And these things pumped water. It's how Holland reclaimed their land and probably helped with the tulips and everything else that they're renowned for. Because it could, take the water out of the ground. The water-soaked land. Anyway, it's there because I started looking at the history of America, and it seems that the Dutch came over in the 1600s. They were the first people there. Again, crash course there on I can't go into it too much because I'd be in here for another half an hour. But what it is the Dutch started the East India Company, and they talk about slaves then. Because they'd already gone to Africa, supposedly it was them that picked up the Africans and started taking them over to America. But that's if we believe the history, but that's what it said. It was them that took people from Africa. I'm sure we did as well, but they're saying that they brought the slaves over to Africa, from Africa to America. Slaves. And who knows, I bet you over here, New Amsterdam. That's what New York was called first until we got our own way and it became New York. And of course, if you do want to look it up yourself, you can look up and you can see, and it explains why it changed name. It seemed that the Dutch gave in to the British because there was going to be another war. And as there was so many wars going on over the place we lived, the Dutch gave in and the English got their own way and it became New York. I don't want to go too much into it but that's it. And you can look up any of these to look up yourself a bit more of the history. But I was a bit shocked that actually for this period of time, yes, slaves. But I do think that when the black president came, slavery stopped for a bit, but then it started with the children. So that's what I see. So I just wanted to put that in, that actually we were not the first ones there, the UK. It was Holland. And I mean, these people were so civilized. They were Catholic, broken away from the Catholic religion. And then they basically were in Europe. They were the rich part. They were rich. They just, whatever they did, they were renowned. They were established. And, also it was like interest rates. They made a lot more money. And this guy explains it, this one here. They talk about millions of people, but there wasn't millions of people. Well, there wasn't millions and millions. I mean, it looked like half of Ireland went to America with the potato famine. And Holland itself only had a few million in it when they started to go over to New Amsterdam, as they called it, to New York. And then yeah, there's just this big gap then of how these big buildings turned up, you know, how even I know they will have a construction date for this, but in New York, but it just seems really weird to me that such small countries with not that many people in it started to take over and do other things. I just thought that was really strange. I just don't see how that matches to the millions that went over, supposedly, to America. It explains it a bit better than me. I'm not trying to explain the whole of history because we don't actually know how much of this is actually correct. But it was interesting to learn that they're saying the Dutch were the first ones there. They made it New Amsterdam. We turned it into New York. But anyway, people get the gist. Anyway, on to the next bit. I was looking at Napoleon, although a lot of people don't know whether Napoleon is real or not anymore. A lot of people think Christopher Columbus is a book and Napoleon might be a book. But let's just say what was ever happening in that time, according to history, which I don't know if we can trust anymore, but it is saying that basically for sort of mid 1770s, sort of right through to about 18, whatever it was, 1815, whatever, a bit further on, Napoleon was just ravaging everywhere. There's no trading, so basically it was starving the people in America who needed to trade with the rest of the world, although look how far they had to sail to get it. But they weren't allowed to because that's what we said over here. And then he turned around and he was going bang, 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 all over Europe. Most of Europe was involved one way or another. They were either fighting them or they were on his side. The Russians fought with him and then they turned on him. And according to this, he surrendered and then they exiled him. And then in the end this is, and then he went and he came back, he won a bit, then he was exiled again, and then he went to St. Helena, which is an island between Africa and South America. And in it, I imagine that half the world is going, I want to get out of here, because most of it's being torn to shreds by all this fighting going on. So I can imagine there that people were, come to the promised land, you'll get a piece of land. So I imagine that that's why there's such an influx. One of the reasons over to America. And not just that, I looked up Ireland. Where's Ireland? There it is, this one here. Now that was quite an interesting video, which please go and watch it. The name's there so you can put it in. Basically, they also went to America. Those that stayed got caught up in the potato famine, and in which they said something like 1 million people died, and 2 to 3 out of 5 million decided to exit off to America. According to this video, the Irish were very, very poor. And again, they were. This is what they're saying, not me. Well, it's just the way it was, and that's the way they looked at it, and they thought, well, you're poor, or you deserve this, or it's your fault. That's what the historians are saying. That's how people would have looked at them. But again, one of the only crops, if you were poor, that people could grow were the potatoes. And then, of course, look what happened. The potato famine. And but the thing that no one's talking about or even connecting is that the boats, when they came over, quarantined the people, which might be what the asylums are about, because they kind of look like buildings. In this video here, I show you an asylum, but maybe that's because they were hospitals. And this is maybe where all the children got taken from, because they come over, oh yes, your promise. So it's a bit like, well, what we imagine what the concentration camps are like. They go in there for 6 months, or when they come out, where's my children? They've gone. They've been settled somewhere else. And you can actually see in certain places that were asking for these children. Mississippi, I think, is one. They were asking for the children because there was such a lack of workers. And then they took these children and they treated them as slaves, which is why the children might not look very happy. They were treated as slaves. As I've been making this video and wanting to put it together, I've kind of changed my mind about what I thought it was, you know, like the given history. Well, we can't trust any of the history, but they will always tell you something and then cover it up with something else. So they sort of tell you the truth, but then they cover it. So the people may have died or the crops failed, but they'll say it's another reason. But anyway, this film now comes into mind. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He's the child catcher. So maybe what they did was, they were always telling us something, but never telling us the truth. And my real feeling now, looking at this stuff, is that basically, with all the supposed wars happening, I just think everybody wanted to get out. And they were promised things by going to other countries, like, for instance, one is America. And there weren't really any diseases or anything, because in a couple of the videos they depict that the people are almost in cells. So basically what they did was, it was almost like what we see in Auschwitz and all these other places. They're separating the children and the men and the boy, all this is going on. And basically, for that period, they put the parents into these they put them into quarantine. Well, that's what they're telling them, or that's what they can give as a sort of narrative, because don't forget, this doesn't seem to be all over the internet, just it's by people telling stories about where their family went or what they're writing. So they put them into quarantine, and then they took the children, and then they sold the children. It's really strange in a way when you hear about all these peoples. But ultimately, people obviously didn't think very much of other people to make them into slaves and buying and selling and all that kind of stuff, and how they depicted. And it's your fault if you're poor, it's your fault if you're ill. So they obviously didn't really care about people at all in those days. So I don't think we came from utopia then. I just see this as a horrible, horrible time, this whole thing. Anyway, there's some... this video here shows you who's emigrating and when, since 1820. Some of these are interesting to get an idea anyway. But how do we know if any of it's true? But I do believe the children one's true, because there's only a little bit of information about it. And just looking at the photographs. Anyway, this is what this video is about. So, well, covering a lot of what my thoughts are later on in this video. And as I said, they bought them, they probably touching them, yeah, because obviously they were put in the care of these people. Who knows what went on these poor children. But that's why none of the children are happy and none of the people look happy, because I don't think they were living in a place like we thought they were. And maybe that's why, I just don't know. I just don't know anymore. But that was a theory of mine, that they sold the children and the children were the slaves. And it didn't matter whether you were black, white, pink, blue. It didn't matter. They did it to the children. All the immigrants' children. And it does seem that the black people who lived there were more wealthier. But I've got something to add, which I'm going to add it now. And basically, when they signed to have these children, they had to look after them till they were 21. Supposing they got a few months a year teaching or education. But basically, they were on slave status. And the children were treated like that. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? The children, see, were treated as slaves. Wherever they come from, all the immigrant children were treated as slaves. And because they were orphaned, in those days they thought, well, that's their fault then, isn't it? That's how they looked at it. So they were sort of second-class citizens anyway. But it doesn't explain how things like the Empire State Building and all these big buildings were here before they got here, because they were. So there's still another part of this history to be learnt. But anyway, there's the War of 1812 going on, And there you go, legacies of the orphan train riders, which seem to be happening from the 1870s. But once all the fighting stopped, because obviously about this time is when, you know, you had your independence, but we were fighting you again, you know, do as you're told. And the first time, well, I think we lost this one. Anyway, it's after this date here, they started going over, a lot more people started going to America. And then that would make sense that 60 years later, when they're all sort of coming over and orphan, that there's loads of orphans. They said in here that it actually took 60 years to implement what the government wanted of the time. Well, yeah. So anyway, that's as far as I've got. That's a bit of it. So there was quarantine. Those children were probably taken away. And people were asking for them. And in one of the programs, they were saying, can I have a blue-haired, blonde-eyed boy? Yes, you can have one of those. And these children, when they were taken from, like, these orphan trains, they weren't treated very nice. They were treated like slaves. But very rarely did the families really want them or like them. And they said, if a family did accept you, they treated you sort of like a family member. Whoa, so these children were treated like they were in a concentration camp. Yeah? So these children were taken and they had to work. So do you see where the slaves is coming in? These children were slaves. So they've just lied about what colour and everything. They have. I just feel they have. So the thing that shines out the most is that the children were slaves. So it totally changes history a bit, doesn't it? They don't seem to sort of announce that publicly, do they? That all the children were treated as slaves. So that's quite incredible as well, isn't it? Considering you can see all the black people there with hats and bowler hats and suits and things on. So that doesn't add up, does it? To the history line, really, because they're not talking about the coloured people, yet they're there. It just seems an horrific crusade to get children. It's quite sad, isn't it, that history is such a lie. But anyway, there's a little bit more history, and I hope that well, we're nowhere at the moment. I'm only regurgitating things that are off the internet, and you know, I tried to find out where is it, but I actually thought maybe I'd found it with the boats because of the dysentery or the illnesses. But James said, no, there's something more sinister than this. But I mean, it does make sense to why the children were taken, because by the time they got out of quarantine, their children had gone. They'd been sold on. Maybe they didn't like all the people coming over because it was an exodus to America. Supposedly, but the buildings were still there. So who built the buildings? Like, who built the pyramids? Because that wasn't the Egyptians. When I showed this the other day on this video here, what happened to the children, I was showing you just a snapshot of John Levy's channel, where he's also adding, as well as other people, Martin Liedtke, all these people, suggesting that this whole thing about moving children didn't just start or end. It's been going on probably for nearly 200 years, or at least, and went on even probably longer. These children then were all moved around, and some of these children definitely didn't go home. This is the Second World War. But this is what they did when we went over to America. Put people into, quarantining the adults and taking the children. I mean, how would anybody know that their mum or your parent has died? Your child has died. They can say anything to the other one and you're going to believe it. Don't forget, they're poor and all this kind of stuff. They're not very wealthy. They're immigrants, remember? And then it's like, oh my God, do you know what this means? This means the Second World War, and maybe the First World War, weren't just what they were showing us at all. This was about them taking, look, reset civilization. Yeah, there you go. Reset civilization. They've been taking our children, and maybe Germany was a place that we saw them. But they're telling us that they're for other reasons. Maybe they did kill people, but they probably did, because it seems with that amount of people, people will die. But they were going there for a different reason, even if they were dying. They were going there to take them away to get the children. So basically, they were doing it in America to repopulate. They did it to Australia. They've done it to other places. They were doing it here. They were doing it there. They're taking our children. That's what's happened. Maybe they can't publicly do it so much anymore, because they were doing it in front of us, just nobody realised. Because we've got the television and reporters and phones, and we've got our own internet and stuff like that. So that it's probably all still happening, because there are reports that millions of children go missing every year, and they're still doing the same thing. I just wanted to add that the Second World War isn't just about destroying infrastructure. I always felt, right, when they want to change something, they just destroy the country, right? They did destroy England, right? Well, I think they did, because I wasn't there, so I have to say by the pictures they did and by the stories I've been told. But those wars, I mean, I actually felt that we were going so electric. We had electric cars that could be powered for hours. They could drive at 100 miles an hour, that we were eco-friendly. And then comes the First World War, and then so many years later we've got the Second World War. And when we come out of that, we've got television, going to the moon, we've got oil, we've got all these extra things, daytime savings they put in to change everything, because they're resetting us into something else at that moment. As it was before, people thought different things. Also, yeah, they did, and the cultures did anyway. But we were going the right way. It was electric. It was free energy. And then, so I saw that the First and Second World War were about destroying infrastructures, just like they do in Syria, just like they did in Iran and Iraq and all these other places when they want to go in and whatever, even if they're real, because half the time now we think, oh, are any of the wars real? Because the media buy it. So they go, hey, can you make me a war? Hey, can you make me a war? It's disgusting. And then they play it to us and we believe it. And that's what's happening. Amber Lyons, just look her up, CNN reporter. That's if she's real, because what's real anymore? Oh, dearie me, it's a bit sad, that one. So basically, they've been doing it to us for a long time. But this whole thing about the Second World War, I felt destroyed Europe's infrastructure, our infrastructure, and basically changed it for us. So we had to rebuild and do different things. And the English people were on rations for a long time. That's not that long ago in the scheme of things. Well, I suppose it is a bit of a time now, for if you're 20 years of age, it'll feel a long time ago. But I'm just saying that I don't think that the First and Second World War, well, they were a myriad of things, because, the Twin Towers were about changing the laws, getting the Patriot Act in America, changing things, and then showing us that they went to war and all this kind of stuff. So it was a myriad of things built into one thing that they could then do from that one thing. And maybe that's what this is. But to realise now suddenly, like, maybe they did kill all the parents off, because they had to die of diseases, remember? But they took our children. And then they're repopulating other areas with them. When you're small, you'll never remember, maybe if you were 2 or 3 years of age, that you were taken. And then you'd have been told some stupid story. Anyway, I was just a bit shocked to realise that it had been going on, and this is what they were doing in the 1800s. I actually wish I could play this video to add to mine, for those that are interested, because this guy gives you a crash course in history. But I can't. It's his video, but I appreciate very much his take on what he thought was happening. He's talking about America's wars. So this bit of the video, what he's actually doing is explaining about what we did. We stopped them trading because they had to come through us even after independence. And you had to come through us, and we stopped the trading. So that's what he's explaining there. He's talking about this period here, okay? This is also another video by him, which is a crash course in history, and explains, he talks about the slaves were set free, and then he goes through, it's a good video to understand, it's his take on it. But anyway, it does seem that the slaves to me seem to be the children and the immigrants, and no matter what colour you were. And then the president that came in after the black president died, and I put that video out yesterday. Well, when he died then, he'd been president, and whatever happened, I think, happened obviously with the next president. If you're going to believe history at all, this person became the president at this time. There you go, because it's just this time period. This is what I was looking at. And basically, he's the person. So basically, we've had all the slaves and all the children, and there's wars, and then there's all the trade things going on, and America's been fighting and trying to take Canada, and there's all these things going on, and whatever, civil wars, things going on, this, that, and the other. And then he comes in. But he was a southerner, and he didn't like the northern part of America, supposedly. And it's this person here who then turned the laws into that the people worked on the plantations. This guy I was just showing you before here, basically he read through the lines that Negro didn't mean just as black people. It meant immigrant. It was the same thing. He was the same thing, because immigrants, everybody was not on the same level. Those that had come in over those years. And he's the one that put the people on plantations. And yes, the black people were on them, but so were the other immigrants. So they can't even tell us the truth about history at all. You have to find these things in other places, or what other people have worked out. And not just that, being on these plantations to start with, it wasn't slavery. It was, in a way, it was getting the people to work for you. But basically, they were given accommodation, and they were given land. And then the plantation owner, this is if you believe the history, but this looks better than what they're telling us, or the way they're telling us. He gave you the seed, and then what it was is, at the end of the season, or when the crop was done, you would give the plantation owner a third or a half, or whatever he picked, and then you kept the rest. So you had your house, you had your life, you worked hard. Obviously, you needed the crops to be able to live, and then you got to pay your landlord. And these people were never given land; they were made to live in these tight cottages, and it was all like that. And that's what went on for a while. But it wasn't just the black people. It was all immigrants, whatever colour. They were also there on these plantations. Whatever happened, I actually feel, and the way it looks, is that actually probably the black people, we were their slaves, really. But for some reason, they then changed history and made it the other way round. And in the end, maybe they were the slaves and everything, but it wasn't like that. It was us, we, the immigrants, the white, the fairer skin. Well, it didn't matter what skin you were. Whichever immigrants went into America and other places, obviously this is. But at this point there, we were the slaves. And then they've turned it round somehow. But they've obviously changed history and everything. That doesn't mean black people weren't slaves. I'm not doing it to upset people. All I'm saying is, you look at the pictures, the black people looked a lot better off than we did. And they looked a lot more relaxed. That doesn't mean they were bad people either, because don't forget, we moved into their country and took it over. Us, the immigrants, and whoever was in America. But I'm just wondering now whether actually what they did was they built all these towns and then they populated it just the way I said. And this is how they did it. They just took our children and kept going, because maybe, they weren't all over America. So basically, all the stuff like Christopher Columbus, because many people have said there were cities and towns there. They were there. They're just talking about when we took over, not them. And these people were there, and black people were there, as many are waking up and realising that they're Native American, even black. And they were there. But you see, for instance, I think it only takes a few years, maybe a decade, and then everybody forgets. And a lot of us do remember Nelson Mandela dying and then him coming and being president, but we didn't remember. And then you do remember, oh my goodness, I know exactly where I was when I heard it. It's really crazy that, isn't it? I just know where I was. Anyway, but I didn't remember it. And this is what happens, and this is how they lose things. And when they keep moving people around and children and all this, who's going to remember their culture? Who's going to remember their history properly if you'll keep being moved around as immigrants, That's what they do. They do it to bolster economies. They do it for many reasons. But whatever happened then carried on, and then we got to see some of it in Germany in the Second World War. And please don't hate me, because lots of people believe that all these people died for well, they did probably die, but for different reasons, and they wanted our children. That's what it's about, and that's what you saw in those concentration camps. It's most disgusting. Anyway, I'm going to add a bit more now. I had a brilliant hangout with Martin Liedtke, and for some reason, on our hangout, for that bit, it didn't record the volume. So I'm just going to play a little bit of his to show you the stuff that he's uncovering and what he sees. Anyway, thanks for watching, but I'm absolutely appalled that actually the children, whatever colour you were, wherever you came from, they were the slaves to start with, right? It's disgusting. Anyway, thanks for watching, and yeah, just enjoy the next bit with Martin Liedtke. And also a little bit of a hangout I had, we finished with myself, okay, afterwards, because obviously that hangout with Martin Liedtke didn't work. Anyway, we've got a tiny bit of him, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of his work, but thank you very much. This is what he's saying. Mind-blowing photography of the events of 1906 in San Francisco. We find big clues and bust the impossible official narrative for the apparent earthquake and subsequent 2-day firestorm. What we find is as little as 2 years later, the entire city had miraculously reappeared like nothing had ever happened. Here we go, just a little bit of his.
So you get these Anglican churches, I can imagine, is shook with an earthquake, and all of this rubble just fell down into tiny little bricklets. How is that even possible? You know, the decimation is like a nuclear bomb, if they exist. All of the metals, you'll see so much metal involved in pipework, visible pipework on the surface. Yeah, nice wallpaper back in the day, but amazing evidence for mud flood. These things are falling in their basements, okay? This is the city hall, mud flooded, completely destroyed. But you get images like this, you know, they're very telling, guys. Now, there are some images, they show you the fire brigade, they have steam powered, you know, fire pumps or what have you. And I found some other clues as well. Now, what you find is there's fire hydrants. Now, I get it, there's this, you know, an earthquake, but the people don't seem to be in shock, and everybody is well turned out. Now, if you've got to get out of your room in a hurry, you're taking a suitcase, you're going to be living, everyone's going to look rough as shit and like tramps in an apocalyptic scenario, you know, to suit the scenery. But they got fire hydrants, but they're not activated. You could just hit the top off that and it would squirt everywhere. But everything just falls in its footprint. And you get a lot of like if it's blast, guys, like if it's blast, you get it all like psh, splattered out. It really does look like a war has happened. Earthquake and 3-day, you know, firestorm with, you know, hurricane strength winds. You see all of it in this, and it's just different. It's like, it looks exactly like the footage you see of the fall of Berlin. When you see them at the end of streets, they're walking away and the streets are getting like pummeled behind them. It looks exactly like that. I'll show you in a minute. So look at the steel structure in this city hall. It's been rebuilt, but this is Greco-Romano architecture, because that's exactly what it is, guys. Okay, this existed. This is why this place is taken out. Now, when you see the state of the streets, you know, some of them are split in two. Everything is covered in rubble, and it's liquefaction happened. These things are gone, where the ground has just turned to putty. But the scale of devastation, guys, is just Just apocalyptic. This is like an apocalypse. And what's with these surface pipes? Huge surface pipes. Now, obviously, they're not laying it after the event. So what is it exactly? A surface pipe for what? And you get Tartaria. Same red granite or grey granite. From the old world, mud flooded. You always get these piles of rubble as well, like everything's just falling in place for them, and they're watching everything, but the people are not acting normal. They're not. There's one woman I seen in shock. The rest are just, you think they'd be in a daze, they lost their will, but crying. You know, nothing. It's the weirdest thing, I'll show you. Like they expect it. Like they expect it. No windows. And no window frames. You think there'd be a little remnant of window frame left? Look at this. Look at this. Now, at first I thought, with these images here, that these were new builds. I thought, oh Christ, what, within a day or two they've managed to, you know, with the streets full of rubble, set up these new skyscrapers. But they're not. They're there. They were there when the earthquake happened, because you can see all the buildings around them in another image burning. So they were there prior to the earthquake. And these Greco-Romano columns everywhere. But look at the floor. What the fuck, guys? Everything's just And look at the Antiquitech device up on that. Dresden looked like that, guys. This is what I mean, right? So everything's burning behind him. Obviously, they've been told to get out. He's grabbed one bag. They got nothing with them. So they're told to get out in a hurry. These got no belongings. These two are in seemingly no hurry. They don't look too stressed or anguished. And they're in white. So an exodus of people moving out of the affected area. Calmly. With no possessions. And then there's this concentration FEMA camp thing ready within a day or so. Just there, huts, bam. It's 3 days these photographs are over, guys. It shows you in a minute.
Nearly 2 hours of Martin Liedtke, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And it was really nice because he does many presentations. And today we were just talking about all sorts of things and everything. And unfortunately, for some reason, it didn't pick up on the volume, and I don't know why. But it didn't record the volume. We did have a nice hangout. I'm just sorry that I just realised that it wasn't recorded and then stuck the recorder back on for a few minutes of Martin. But anyway, I'm going to put the other bit that me and James, Patricia also had a problem with her microphone. We couldn't hear her and she had to come back on and all this weird stuff. But anyway, I put a bit of me and James on afterwards talking about things. So anyway, enjoy this bit and the bit with James.
I just wanted to see if it's going to just record anything. Yeah, my thing's going, the volume's going now. I can see the thing moving.
It was moving before as well.
But it's recording it now. Is there any way, just for a few minutes, you can plug your book on that? Because I haven't got anything. It didn't record any of it, but it's recording it now because I could see it going up and down on the thingy bob.
Yeah, no, I got it published tomorrow. Well, if I get in time, which is the Holy Grail of our flat Earth, which is mind-blowing. It's all to do with Italian mud floods, resets, Venetians, EM technology, Antiquitech, Aquatech, free energy. This covers a lot of subjects. Right. So much. As you say, and it's now or never. Just press a button in the morning. So now or never, there's no or never. That's it.
What, to print it, you mean?
Yeah, with the errors, and she's not understanding something that I'm trying to say and convey. So I need to get on type, concentrate, and convey it to her like now.
Well, you better go then, hadn't you?
Priority wise, I got it, Karen. Sorry, I gotta get this done. No choice. And I can
Good
get
luck with that.
as well. So, work.
Oh, well, I really appreciate the hangout, even if it didn't record it. Well, it did record it, it just didn't record the volume for some reason.
Sorry about that, Karen. It's a shame.
Oh. Well, we've had a really great hangout, and I really appreciate your time. And I know that you're very busy. Well done, Martin, for getting your book ready. Well done.
Yeah, that was easy. No. It was easy for everyone else. That was hell, actually, to get that out. That's just all the work that went into it, the hack, having to put it all back together again after it's already done all the work, and do it again in duplicate and then in like triplicate actually, and go through everything over again. So like, this is like all of the time in between when I'm not doing like all the research and Flat British stuff. I'm trying to keep up with all of those people. So yeah, it's having Robert Block.
Just ask you, where do you find some of this stuff? Like the other day when you were doing that hangout, when you were showing this whole town, San Francisco, being blown up, and then all the pipes there. Where do you find all this stuff?
Me. I have a giant resource, Karen. My resource on my Flat Earth British site is like one of the biggest resources like available on the internet free. So it's like tens of thousands of documents, map resources, photographic journal resources. So all you need to do is what I do is I go into my own resource, I dig in, spend a few hours finding different, photographic albums, documents, and then I just pick them apart. Just spend ages doing it. But the resource is mostly all connected with how people are Flat Earth British peeps. So I have sent to me in emails and stuff, a lot of the links. All of the books and the documents are all on my resource. I've been saving them for 5 years and I got 10 files. I got 4 terabyte hard drive here per book full of rare stuff in case it goes missing off the internet. I make sure that so I can pull them up if I need to, and I go through them on my version. I'm always discovering new stuff on my own resource, which is some of that stuff's been in there for years, so I know it hasn't been tampered with since then. So that's how I do it. That way it's more trusted because it's my stuff.
We think that we're such a society where we're all connected and we know everything and we've got all the information, but we don't. And it's so fragmented. I think a lot of the information is out there somewhere, but people have to piece it together to bring it in. Because like you say, you find your pictures. I mean, that looked like a war had happened there.
I would safely say that was what it looked like. It's a giant war. Looks like America had World War III in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Is what it looks like.
It does, doesn't it?
Cities destroyed, every single city, major city in America has a fire exactly around the same time. Some of them too, Boston, Chicago, the Stiegler event, all the same year, 1871. There's other events that all happened the same year as well. So multiple giant cities have been to the ground all over America. And then they built giant civilization called the Expos, and they burned down as well. Stranger story, Karen, but there's a lot in it. I can't relate it all to you now.
I know, you'd be here from now to forever, wouldn't you, trying to explain it?
I would. And I haven't stopped. I've been busy all day long. So I bid you adieu. I got to fuck off.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for coming on.
No worries. See you all soon.
Yeah, we'll do it again soon. Sorry about the recording.
All right, no worries. All right. Bye, James. Tammy.
Thanks a lot.
We'll have
to meet you.
All right, good to talk to you, bro. That was epic. You would be.
Yeah, excellent.
Nice one, bro.
Love you, Martin.
Karen, good.
Yeah, I'm always good. Always good.
I know. Let me see. All right, peace out.
Bye, darling. Oh, I can't believe that.
I think it's anything that you didn't do. I think it's been remotely done from somewhere else, because if they can send presidential alerts to people's phones and people talk about the batteries going down, I'm sure they can do a lot more than they tell us, and they can probably interfere with anything. So, like when I've done the live ones, they seem to clip out on key words if I've mentioned certain topics. So I'm sure they're listening in. They know who we are anyway. It's just one of those things.
I wanted it for my video. Is there just any we wait just for a few minutes? We can talk about the.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, yeah. Do you want to do a test run? Make sure it's got the volume this time.
Yeah, okay. Then I'll stop this one and I'll just sit. Something else has been happening, hasn't it, James? All along.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say very quickly, because I put it on my video. I actually looking, because obviously you sent me John Levi, and looking at that, and it was really strange that he was putting that out after what I was saying the day before on my video, my thoughts about.
Yeah, I sent him a link to your video in the comments to that video, so hopefully he'll see it, and he'll probably make a video and give his take on it, and it'll just add. So it's getting the message out there. This is the thing all we can do, really. I mean, obviously YouTube is going to be hell bent on not advertising our channels, and it's going to have to be very. I think that's the way forward. While we've got YouTube, don't worry about because if they're going to pull the plug, there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to find other platforms. But it's getting the message out there, and the more people. I mean, if one person tells 10 and they each tell 10, the mathematics will show that it will spread anyway.
The Hitler side was just the end of what they've been doing all over the place we live in.
Well,
they've been setting up these camps. They've been setting up these camps. They've been putting people, what they say is, into quarantine, and then obviously they're like prisons, leaving them there and this is in the 1800s.
Yeah.
They started, and they took the children, and that's why there's orphan trains in America, because they actually took the children and they sold them, and they sold them as slaves. And it didn't matter whether you were white, black, like I said, pink, blue, it doesn't matter what race you were. Yes, later on, but even that history, black people weren't made slaves straight away, it seems, but they were put on plantations. They were treated more as a second-class citizen, but they had their own farms and things, and they did this tithe thing with the plantation owner. So he gave them the seeds and everything. They planted it all, they grew it, and then they took a third or half of the money. So
actually, that's no different from in this country, because you had to go to the miller to have the corn ground, and you had to pay a tax to the Lord.
Yeah, they did it to everybody. And what this person said was, reading between the lines, they called them Negroes, but that wasn't necessarily the colour. They just called it Negro people. And that was all the immigrants. So it was all the immigrants they did it to. So they wouldn't give them the land, which they were promised. They actually just made them into farmers for them. But what it was is, with the children, what they did was, and that's why none of the children are smiling in the photographs, is that they took them, sold them, and these children in the early 1800s were slaves. They were working the farms, and they were probably touching them. So that's why nobody's smiling.
Mm.
And what it was is, it's been going on, and this is why children were sent to Australia. This is why they took them in the war. This is what Hitler was about, probably what the concentration camps were about, and they've lied to them. So the Holocaust was taking the children.
Not only that, they've not had to change the words in the books, because they've twisted the word meaning Negro, and they've just applied it to one group as a divide and conquer.
According to what I'm looking at, they did make them into slaves more, but it didn't actually happen more till the turn of the century, the 19th century. So it wasn't hundreds of years of them being a slave. And you can actually see that what we said on our hangout that wasn't recorded was that there probably were black people, and then somehow we've come in. And it was the other way round. You were saying we were the slaves, not them.
Yeah. They've twisted it, took the story and twisted it just purely as a divide and conquer technique to set one group against another.
But they took it didn't matter what race you were, they took children.
Oh no. Yeah, they just exploit that and then turn it as one group against another, because it's an easy way to identify people and say, right, it's all white people that did it against black people. So it sets up a reaction of resentment and hatred. That's what it's always been about.
So what we're saying is that the asylums might not have been asylums, or they were where the people who knew the truth went, or they were like the quarantines to keep the people in while they took the children.
I would imagine they would have probably used various torture methods and brainwashing techniques and experiments to like, it's like, you can leave here if you forget about Tataria or whatever you want, whatever it was called, and they sever their ties with the past. those that were most defiant probably found themselves in there and also probably, well, I dread to think what went on. None of it would be pleasant.
But it could have been that they actually built all the buildings waiting for the people to come.
Yeah, oh yeah, the build. Well, it's happening now. I mean, you've got those empty cities that have been built in Ethiopia and China. There's tower blocks to take thousands and thousands of people, and they're sitting there empty. They're in readiness. It's going to be the pictures I see in it now. You're like 500 years time. You'll have the equivalent of us saying, "Look, there's something wrong with this. Those people did not build those buildings," and it'll be doing the same thing over and over again. Because it may be that the star forts and pyramids and things and the castles are not from the same reset or the same. They're not all from the same era. They're from various presets, but are so well built that they survive. But the modern day one would be, or in the future, they could put a Model T Ford with a Tesla car, and they'd be telling that the people of the future, oh, that's the same people made that car and that car, and there'd be someone going, that doesn't look right, and that's what they've done. And that's the same tactics they're using all the time. We're seeing, well, as far as I'm concerned, like California is a version of it. They're test run for it to see what they can get away with. They're using the media to push the fake Diablo winds, as they call them, and firenadoes. High winds do not ignite things. Sorry. That's direct energy weapons. I mean, they're dues. We're always told to pay our dues, aren't we? They're using the same word twice.
It just seems really incredible that people don't know their history. And in fact, somebody put on the channel, our first president was Obama, but he wasn't. And a lot of people in America don't even know that they had a black president and that things were different. And I think it's when he died, that's when they brought in the next person, Johnson. Is it Johnson? I can't remember his name now. I'll have to go and anyway, the next white president, who was from the South, he's the one that brought in some of these articles about making sure, because he didn't, they wanted to rule and they didn't want anybody else, like, they just didn't want. And they were the ones that brought in a bit of slavery, but it wasn't till like the middle 1800s, like 1860 odd, 1870 odd, but this happened.
Yeah. Well, that shows it. I mean, well, even in our lifetime, I mean, there's a lot of people still believing the fake narrative on terrorists hijacking planes and flying them into buildings. But that's pretty obvious that that's all fake. But there's still people who believe it. So even within like the last 20 years, they've changed history because they've lied about what actually happened to most people.
Well, I hope the research doesn't happen because the people are waking up, because we are waking up.
It's going to go horribly wrong for them this time. There's definitely a sense of finality about it, and the good side has won. I feel that. It's just this horrible play out stage of it that we have to go through for some horrible whatever reason, But yeah, people are slowly starting to see it.
Yeah, I wish that more people would, and but even not voting, they can lie about the figures, can't they? They can lie all the time, and everything is about fear. It's not about, and in reality, once you turn your back on it, there is no fear because we don't need them.
No,
they're just Bollywood.
I
think I proved it on Unscrambled that everything's a lie. All the footage is a lie. Even only last week, that impeachment's a lie. It's all just Bollywood. It's all just fake, and it's all just put out as a story. And we're living in a living drama.
I didn't even know anything about the Watts case because I don't watch any of the media, so I couldn't tell you who's in the cabinet in the UK because it means nothing anyway. They're just actors and actresses.
Yeah, well, I just have a big feeling that the whole thing is deep fake. And even on the little video I put out, it actually says they can't even tell the difference between the real ones and the fake ones. No. And I think that's such a cop-out because surely people do know the difference. They do. You can send them to laboratories, or there's people that I put on my video that the news went to. These people would know whether they were deep fake or not. So they can if they want to. And this piece of software to actually not have deep fakes and to see what they are, they could add it to YouTube, they can add it to Facebook, but they're not going to, because if they did, we realise how fake YouTube and Facebook was.
Who is running deepfake anyway? I mean, that'd be another part of them. They're not going to tell the truth. They're part of the same system, I should think.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can get a piece of paper with details on it and rubber stamp it with the word approved. That doesn't mean it's real. That's basically what they're doing.
What they're doing is history's not happening. They're making the lie history, and people don't realise. So history's not happening naturally, or because this. I mean, she's called Amanda Lyons. She came out in 2014. She made these programs or this documentary about Bahrain with some important stuff that she shot. And then basically she got told that she couldn't put it on, and they weren't going to put it as a grade A on CNN, because basically she got told that these countries buy the news. So Obama passing that law was just a continuation of it, because they obviously knew what was going on anyway. And these countries have been buying the news and making it for years. So what they did, let's order a war today. Let's order us at war. And then where the Gulf War, they actually was one of the wars they took us to. I bet you they don't take us to any anymore. They'll just show us pictures and say that we're at war.
More than likely. I mean, it's like the Antarctic. When they show a piece of film footage and say they're on the Antarctic, all you're seeing is white ice. That could be anywhere. That could be Alaska. There's nothing to prove where it is. It's just what they're telling us with all of it. All the weather is scripted. I'm not saying that the weatherman who's in front of the camera is in on it as such. They're compartmentalized. So they just get told to read something, and it's probably controlled by fear. It's like, if you want to keep your job, you'll read this out. And most people are stuck in that monetary system, and they won't dare step out of it because they're too frightened to.
We were actually watching the news, and they obviously got people to listen to it because it was about deepfake, and more people were listening once they think, oh, deepfake, let's hear about that. Those things attract people. What the video is about, if you haven't seen it, is that they basically all they could go on about was, this is bad for our democracy, it's bad for the politicians, not bad for the people, not bad for us, and they need to sort it out. And then the next thing is they add that we could be going to war with Iran.
Yeah.
That's what the news is about. They talk about one thing and they're actually leading you to telling you about something else.
Well, that's to plant the idea there. It's sort of like we're going to war off the back of something else. It's like, tell everybody we can't account for $3.2 trillion, and the next day you've got 2 towers hit by planes. So it's distraction tactics as well. It's all about order out of chaos, the chaos that they cause, and then they're trying to, because people will get emotional, and for the right reasons. They're concerned about the planet, but they're being misled by that wretched Extinction Rebellion.
Were you a bit shocked when we went through that footage to see that all that was a lie? I've never done that before, and the fact that all they've done is sped the footage up to make it.
No, I wasn't exactly shocked, because in some ways I'm not a bit surprised really, because I've always had a funny feeling of something isn't right with these photos, but I've never known where to look. And part of me wants to dive into that photo and actually talk to these people, and you know, and wondering what they're thinking. But it's that look of sadness about them. Nobody's smiling.
They look just like the children of Auschwitz. That's what they look like.
Yeah,
they've got the same look on their face. It's horror. Yeah. It's fear.
They're traumatized, aren't they?
Yeah, but it makes sense now that they were slaves.
Yeah.
So the whole slavery thing started with the immigrants. It didn't matter what you were. The children were taken and made into slaves. That's how it started. And then eventually they turned it into that it was black people who were the slaves. But as I said, they used the word Negro, but Negro meant immigrant, really. They were it meant all of them, and it happens to all the immigrants.
Yeah. I would go so far as to say that they wouldn't have any shortage of, that's if they were allowed to volunteer, but compared to probably what else they were having to being forced to do, probably walking in front of a camera was quite an easy option, and you get a chance to wear some half decent clothes for a change. And I bet they were just put back in rags afterwards.
The way I put it together was actually listening to the stories that the people were telling, and they're actually writing saying that they were put in quarantine. So that's how I put it all together, that they were putting the adults into quarantine when they went to America and other places, and then taking the children.
Yeah. Well, they've been doing it with the FEMA camps. If the stories are true that they can't find these children and reunite them with parents, they're doing it under our noses, even today.
It's just, I find it disgusting that we
don't forget there's all the unregistered children within the sex industry and within the scientific research centres that nobody even knows about, which they've shown in that series called 30, I think it's called 11 or something, or 13 on Netflix, and that will be based on something that really does happen. There will be probably laboratory children that they're not registered, they're unknown, they're kept hidden away, they probably never see the outside world, they're in high security places, and there could be thousands, if not millions of them.
I was a bit shocked about that. Even in American history, when they were talking about it, they reckon something like 12 million people went to America. I mean, that's still a lot of people. I didn't think, if you imagine, there's only 5 or 6 million in Ireland at the time, and half of them went to America to get away from the potato famine and probably all the wars that were going on in Europe with Napoleon and all that.
Well, go back to...
They talk about millions. So when they said that the orphan trains, there was 30,000 orphan children in New York. Well, that's not true, is it? They are the immigrants' children. That's what they've done. But they're talking about large amounts of people. So it sounds like there was millions and millions of us even back then.
Well, if you go back to like the collapse, this is going with the official narrative of history, the collapse of the Roman Empire. What is it? Suddenly all of Northern Europe, the population explodes, and we've got invasions by Jutes, by Danes, by Vikings, by Saxons. And it's like, where did all those people suddenly spring from? That's obviously a masked version of a truth, and it's probably another reset time, maybe. I don't know, or it may even be part of this one.
I wasn't sure as well whether, because now people are saying that Napoleon isn't actually a real person. It might be a book or a machine or whatever they did to us.
Yeah.
According to, if you agree with the history, he ravished around Europe. The whole of Europe was at war. Either the Russians were with him or against him. We were with him fighting this. These wars went on for a few good years. And I think the people thought, yeah, let's get out of here. So this is why the Dutch, the German, the French, the Spanish, the Italian, they're all going over to America to get away from it.
Well, you always get in wars, you always get refugees that move, don't you? So maybe, I mean, the story, there's somewhere peaceful you can go. So they all flock to the ships willingly. I mean, there's another one you could say about with Africa. If you're in a situation where you're having to walk 5 miles just to get water that might not even be safe to drink, if you're offered the opportunity to come into Europe, you're going to take it because your life is going to improve. And I bet they won't tell them it's going to be cold over here and a different climate. They won't find that out until they get here. And of course, they'll have to have all these vaccinations to come in the country and be screened.
Doing like opening the barriers here and letting everybody in. They're just, all it seems is, because my bloodline, I told you, is I've got French, German, and Jewish in me. So that comes from few generations before, but my dad grew up as a kid, well, till he was about 7 or whatever, in London, in Homerton, which was a poor part of London. But they got there. I think they've just been moving people around for centuries. Well, as long as we can go back, they've been moving people around, moving them. So those immigrants came here. Then people go to America. You understand what I mean? They're just moving us around all the time. I think to lose our cultures, to lose so many things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all to hide us from hiding our true past and where our origins and everything. And I think it's just one ongoing onslaught against us.
Yeah, what the enemy is us. We're the enemy, the people.
Well, they manipulate us so we're not seeing it. It's all relies on a mass deception. Once that deception starts to collapse, they lose their power. It's just unfortunate that there's not many people seem to know about Admiralty law and how you're tricked, because it's not, you're not forced into it. You voluntarily give your authority over to them from the moment you say that you understand in court. It's always deceptive the way they do it. They trick people into things all the time.
And the people don't realise.
No, they're encouraged to pick a side in everything, and this horrible mentality most people have got. They're always looking to some authority for an answer. They're not looking within themselves for the answer.
What they did was, in the past, they kept the people in fear. The whole time they must have kept everybody in fear as well, which is why the picture shows.
They still do. How many people will say, "Fuck it, I'm not paying the bills anymore"? They will pay it because they'd be frightened of losing their home or going to court. There's so many things, like, was it Patricia said about the income tax being voluntary, and yet that's everybody just assumes, and well, it's taking out your wages. You don't actually have a say as such. They make you can probably opt out of it, but they make the paper trail so damn difficult for people to find. Same with the TV license and the council tax. People just assume that it's law and they have to do it. And because it's written in a strange language of legalese, most people don't. It's deliberately done that way so people can't understand it.
Or they keep us so busy with everything else that
oh yeah, there's that as well. It's all bombardment.
It's so narcissistic and angry, really.
Well, this is we're at the height of silly season. I mean, all children will be bombarded with adverts for whatever is the latest craze, whether it be Xbox or something, and they'll be on at the parents. I want this for Christmas. I want this for Christmas, and there's all that pressure and the consumerism that goes with it. It's like, bloody hell. I mean, I'm totally out of touch with it. Next time I go in town, it's going to be a shock because there's bound to be lights up.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, for this we've been going 25 minutes. I think that's enough. So thanks for your input there, James.
You're welcome.
That we didn't seem to get Martin Liedtke. I don't understand.
Well, it's just it's probably he's marked through his IP address, and it's like, oh, we'll bugger this up, so we silence them.
Yeah, halfway through, this noise just started happening on his microphone.
Yeah, that's probably something to do with it. I did wonder at the time. I thought, I wonder if that's external. But yeah, if there's like 50 channels with all 2,000 subscribers, it's far better than just having one channel that can get knocked out. Then it makes it harder for them to target us. Safety in numbers with all of this. So every video I do from now on, I'm sharing other channels, links and things. And it's always stuff I've watched anyway first, so I can say, well, have a look at this. I'm not going to do it without looking at the stuff first.
Share and share.
That's it.
Anyway, we'll finish this. I'll just finish the recording. So thanks. I don't know if Patricia's there now. Patricia? She's not there. Anyway, James, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome, Karen. You're welcome.
Thank you, Willow, Patricia, wherever you are. Oh, there she is.
Hey. Willow.
But we can't hear her.
Maybe she's been muted all this time and not her doing it and outside.
No, I've been watching for her microphone to go off. See, even we can't hear her.
Nah.
Something spooky going on. Anyway, I'm going to stop the recording. Sorry, Patricia, we can't hear you. But anyway, I know she's there because her microphone's off. But thanks very much for that. And thanks very much for this lovely hangout we had with Martin Liedtke that didn't record. Anyway, thanks very much.